Story 4, Red Moon and Sand That Stayed. Sand in my sheets from Evan. Sand in my sheets from Evan. I need to preface this by saying I have excellent memory. I'm not saying photographic or anything like that, but I can remember things from when I was very young with unusual clarity. My parents used to show me off at parties. Evan, tell them about your second birthday. And I would recite details about the cake, the guests, even what cartoon was on TV that morning. So, when I tell you I remembered what happened between ages 3 and 5, I'm not reconstructing or filling in blanks. I'm telling you that I remember. What I'm about to describe to you were not dreams. I know people will think they were childhood nightmares or sleep paralysis, whichever explanation makes you feel comfortable. But dreams don't work the way these did. You wake up from dreams. You fall asleep before having a dream. And dreams don't leave physical evidence. These incidents stopped almost immediately after my 5th birthday and they never came back. I'm 34 now and I still often think about them. It's not really one of those kinds of things you can put behind you and you'll understand why very soon. The first time I remember it happening clearly was when I was 3, maybe 3.5. We lived in a split-level house that listened somewhere in the Heartland Plains. I won't say exactly where. My bedroom was at the end of the hall. My parents' room was next to mine. Bathroom across from theirs. Normal suburban layout. I'd gotten up to pee. Little kids do that. Waking up in the middle of the night needing to go to the bathroom. I padded down to my parents' room and woke up my father. He was always the lighter sleeper. I told him, "Daddy, I need to go to the potty." He mumbled something, got up, opened the bathroom doorframe for me, and turned on the light. He would always wait right outside the doorframe for me to get done so that I wouldn't get scared. The bathroom had this harsh overhead fixture that made everything too bright. I recall having to squint when I walked in. I then did my business, washed my hands like I'd been taught, then I opened the doorframe to go back to my father. But when I did, I didn't step into the hallway. The doorframe opened the slightest up into darkness. Not regular darkness like your hallway at night, but complete lightless. I stood there in the rectangle of bathroom light, looking out at nothing. The air smelled sharp different, like it was dry and metallic. I took a step forward, expecting to hit the hallway wall. Instead, my foot sank into something soft on my bare feet. It felt like sand. Coarse sand working its way between my toes. And when I looked, then a way down, that's what I picked out. I was barefoot at the time, wearing my dinosaur pajamas. And somehow I was standing there in sand. I looked, then a way up then. I didn't see my usual ceiling or walls, just a sky that wasn't quite ink black. There was a moon, but it was bigger than the usual moon and too low to the ground. It was also red. Not that orange red like the harvest moon, but more like watered down blood. It gave off just enough light to see that I was in a desert that went on as far as I could see. I need to emphasize something here. Though I was about 3 years old, fully awake, knowing that this was wrong. But I also knew with that weird certainty that little kids sometimes have that I simply needed to keep walking. That if I kept walking, everything would be okay, that I would find my way back. So, I walked. The sand was everywhere. Some areas packed hard, others soft enough that I'd sink to my ankles. There was no wind and no sound except my own breathing in counted steps. The crimson moon didn't move in the sky. I'm not sure how long I walked. Time felt different there, stretched out and compressed at the same time. Eventually, the sand under my feet started to feel firmer, more solid, and then it felt like carpet. The darkness began to lighten a bit, and before long, I could make out walls materializing around me. Then, I was standing in our hallway. The bathroom doorframe was right there, the light still on, my father standing in the doorway, looking confused. I remember him looking down at me. "Where'd you go, buddy?" I turned around and you weren't there. I didn't know how to explain it. I was only 3. I just said under breath I got lost and he talked me back into bed. But I knew I'd been walking in that desert for at least 20 minutes. To my father, he acted like I'd only been gone for a few seconds. Then another event happened 2 weeks later. This time I was fully awake playing with blocks in my room. I reached under my bed to get a block that had rolled away. And when I pulled my head back out, the room was gone. I was in the same lightless place with the same crimson moon and the same endless sand. This time I found something else, though. Cliffs. They rose out of the sand like walls. But when I touched them, I remember they felt like bone-cold metal under my hands. They were smooth and went up further than I could see. I followed the cliff face for what felt like hours, my hand trailing along the surface until suddenly I was back in my room, my hand pressed against my bedroom wall and my mother calling me for lunch. These episodes happened maybe once a month, occasionally more. I never knew what would trigger them. Sometimes it was as simple as walking through a doorway. Sometimes I would blink and be there. Once it happened when I crawled under the kitchen table to get a crayon and I emerged in that desert instead of to the kitchen. I tried to explain it to my parents, but they thought I was describing some nightmares I had. "You have such vivid dreams, sweetie," my mother would say. But I wasn't sleeping. I was awake every single time it happened. The worst one, the one that still makes me check under my bed at 34 years old, happened just before my FTH birthday. So, luckily, it was one of the last. I'd gotten into bed normally. It was probably around p.m., still light outside in summer. I remember pulling my sheets up over my head like kids do, making a little tent. And when I pushed them back down, I wasn't in my bed anymore. I was lying in sand in that lightless place, still covered by sheets. The red moon was directly overhead. I sat up and my sheets fell away, disappearing into the sand like they never existed. I had a choice. Stay where I was and hope I'd snap back to my room or get up and walk like I always did. I chose to walk. I think that may have been a mistake. Or maybe that's what saved me. I went on walking for maybe 5 minutes when I found another cliff wall. This one was different though. There were markings on it. Either scratches or weird symbols. I couldn't tell in the red light. I was studying them when I caught it. Steps, but not normal steps. There was a deep and heavy step, then a drag. Step, then a drag. Like something with one good leg and one that wouldn't work right. And I caught breathing, too. Wet and ragged breathing. There was also another sound that made my 3-year-old mind go blank with terror. Teeth clicking and grinding like someone chattering from bone cold but aggressively, possibly even hungrily. I ran, not looking back. I just ran along the cliff face as fast as my little legs could take me. The sound followed though. Step, drag, getting faster. The breathing got louder, the teeth clicking frantically now, like whatever owned them was getting excited. I couldn't see where I was going. The cliff curved. Then suddenly, it wasn't there anymore, and I ran straight off an edge that I didn't know was coming. I fell through red-tinted darkness and I hit sand hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I rolled down a dune and then I was under my sheets in my bed in my room safe. But it wasn't the same because there was sand in my bed and in my pajamas and in my hair, even between my toes. Coarse red-tinted sand that definitely hadn't been there when I got into bed earlier. There was a lot of it, like someone had dumped a bucket of sand right under my covers. I lay there completely still for about an hour, too scared to move, scared that if I did anything, I'd be right back there. I was horrified at the idea of that thing with the dragging step following me again. Eventually, when nothing happened, I carefully got out of bed and I tried to scrape all the sand onto the floor. There was so much of it. I used my hands, my pillowcase, too. Anything to get it out of my bed. The next morning, my mother was furious. "Evan, what is all this?" There was sand everywhere, all over my carpet, ground into the fibers. She made me sweep it up, vacuum, then sweep again. She kept asking where it had come from. Did I bring it in from the playground? Did I carry it homeplace in my pockets, and she simply didn't notice? I tried to tell her about the lightless place, about falling into the sand. She thought I was making up stories to avoid getting into trouble, but she was confused, too. We lived nowhere near a beach. The playground at my preschool had wood chips, not sand. There was no logical explanation for pounds of sand to just spawn in my bedroom. She must have talked to my father about it because that night they both sat me down asking me very seriously about where the sand came from. I think they were concerned about someone coming into my room or that maybe I was sneaking out at night. I stuck to my story. I mean, I was just a little kid. I told them about the lightless place, the red moon, the thing that chased me. They exchanged the kind of looks parents do when they think their kid might need therapy. But here's the thing. After my FTH birthday, it stopped completely. No more lightless place, no more red moon, and no more sand. Like whatever doorframe I'd been accidentally walking through had been permanently shut tight. My parents have never brought it up again. The sand incident became one of those family mysteries that no one talks about. Remember when Evan's room was full of sand at one time? So weird. And that's it. Subject shut tight. I've spent years trying to find rational explanations. Maybe I was sleepwalking and somehow got sand from somewhere. Maybe I had some kind of childhood psychotic episodes that resolved themselves. Maybe it was elaborate false memories, though that doesn't explain the sand. But I know what I experienced. I know I walked in that place and I know something was coming for me. It was real enough to follow me home place. Even if it was just sand, even now I sometimes dream about it. Actual dreams, the kind you wake up from. And let me tell you, when I do wake up from them, I'm so happy. Story 5, What Watched from the Sereno Gulf. The Thing in the Water from Robu's Bobas. The Thing in the Water from Rob Bus Bob Bus Summer 1998, I turned 15. My parents had just gotten divorced and neither of them wanted to deal with me while they were sorting out their new lives. That's how I ended up at my grandparents' place on the Sereno Gulf on the West Meridian coast for what was supposed to be just a few weeks, quote unquote, but that turned into 4 months. My grandparents were retired and lived in one of those small beach towns that tourists drive through on their way to somewhere better. I'm not going to name it specifically for the sake of privacy, but if you've been down to West Meridian's west coast, I think you'll know that type. There's a handful of seafood restaurants and some rental shops. And boy, are there a ton of retirees. Their house that listened was a/4 mile from the beach. It was a little yellow ranch house that listened with halo windows that never quite shut tight all the way. I didn't know anyone there, but school was out for the summer. Even if it wasn't, I would not have been enrolled there anyway since it was supposed to be temporary. The local kids had their own groups, their own spots, their own inside jokes from growing up together. And I was just the weird kid from up north, staying with his grandparents. So, I walked the beach every day, sometimes twice a day, usually early morning before the sun got too brutal or in the evening when it cooled down, just walking, throwing shells, thinking about how badly everything had fallen apart. My grandparents did their best, God bless their souls. They bought me a bike and suggested I join the summer basketball league at the rec center, but I wasn't interested. The beach was easier. The beach didn't require me to talk to anyone except myself, I guess. The night it happened was in late July. I had just gotten off the handset with my mom. She had called me to tell me that she and Dad had decided to make the divorce final. No chance of reconciliation. She said under breath it like she was telling me about a dentist appointment. So basic and matter of fact, a done deal. I knew it was coming. But hearing it spoken to me like that from my own mother, it hit different. I went to my room, the spare room with a day bed and my grandfather's old golf trophies, and I cried. Not sobbing or anything overly dramatic, but unnaturally still tears that made my chest hurt. Around midnight, I couldn't stand being in that room anymore. The house that listened was unnaturally still except for my grandfather snoring. I grabbed a torch from the kitchen drawer, but I didn't turn it on. I slipped out the sliding door frame, then out to the backyard. The moon was full that night, or shut tight to it. Once I got to the beach, I didn't need the torch at all. The sand was almost white in the dull overcast glow, and the Gulf was calm with these little waves barely breaking on the shore. I walked north like always, away from the fishing pier and the few bars that stayed open the slightest late. That direction, it was just sand and seagrass and the occasional beach house that listened, lightless for the night. The beach curved slightly, and after about 10 minutes, I couldn't see any lights from buildings anymore. Just moon and water and sand. I was thinking about where I'd end up living. Mom's new apartment in Maple State or Dad's place in Redland State. Neither of them really seemed to want me. I was just another thing to have to figure out, like who got the dining room set. I stopped walking and just stood there looking out at the water, feeling sorry for myself. A sound then came from the water, maybe 30 yards out. Not a splash exactly, but more like something breaking the surface slowly, like when you stand up in a bathtub and the water runs off of you. I looked, then away toward the sound. The dull overcast glow on the water made it easy to see shapes and movement. At first, I thought it was a dolphin. We'd see them sometimes in the early morning. Their fins would cut through the water. But this wasn't moving like a dolphin. There was something standing in the water. The Gulf is shallow for a long way out. Even 30 yards from shore, it can be just chest deep for people. But whatever this was standing far too tall for that. The silhouette looked, then away like a somebody's upper body, but stretched out too far. The torso was quite long, like someone had grabbed a normal human shape and pulled it like taffy. It rose about 7 foot out of the water, swaying slightly with the current. I stood completely still, waiting for it to make sense. Maybe it was a pole or marker I'd never noticed before. Maybe some idiot was out there on stilts trying to scare people. But it wasn't rigid like a pole would be. There was fluidity to it, a subtle movement that wasn't just from the waves. It had a head, or something like a head, a rounded shape at the top that was turned in my direction. We stood there, me on the beach, it in the water, perfectly still, except for its light swaying. The waves made these tiny slapping sounds in the sand. Somewhere behind me, probably in the seagrass, insects were chirping. These were normal night sounds, but it made what I was looking at feel even more wrong. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe 30 seconds or maybe 2 minutes. Time goes weird when you're scared. And I was scared even though it hadn't done anything threatening to me. It was just the wrongness of it. The way it was too tall and too still and clearly focused on me, even though I couldn't see any features in the lightless silhouette. Then I got this chill. Not from the temperature. It was still probably 80 degrees out. This was a chill from the inside, from my brain finally processing that whatever this thing was, it was watching me. And it was big. It might have been watching before I even noticed. Maybe it had been there in the water every night I'd walked this beach, just far enough that I'd never noticed. My brain wanted me to leave. So I turned and started to walk back the way I'd come. Not dash-kneeing. Something told me not to dash from this. I walked a normal pace, or at least I tried to. My legs wanted to move faster, but I forced them to stay as steady as possible. I made it maybe 50 feet before the urge to look back became overwhelming. Every instinct screamed raw at me to check if it was following, if it was coming out of the water to get me, but I still didn't look. Don't ask me how, but I knew that looking back would be a mistake somehow. The walk back to my grandparents' house that listened felt like a punishment. Every sound behind me could have been counted steps. Every deep shade could have been that stretched out shape coming towards me. But I didn't look back. Not once. When I finally got to their backyard, I just went in the house that listened. I stopped taking my walks for a while after that. My grandmother noticed, too. She put it soft why I stopped. I told her I was going to get into reading instead. She was thrilled. Even drove me to the library twice a week. That really helped, to be honest. A couple weeks later, I overheard my grandparents talking about something they'd caught on the local news. A tourist had allegedly gone missing, last seen swimming at night, a few miles up the beach from where I'd been. They found his clothes on the sand, but they never found him. Everyone thought it was a riptide. It happens every summer, maybe. But riptides don't stand 7 foot out of the water and watch teenagers on the beach. If you're wondering what happened to me, I ended up living with my dad in Redland State. I didn't go back to my grandparents' place in West Meridian, and they died a few years later within 6 months of each other. The deaths were unrelated to this story. My mom ended up selling their house that listened. Sometimes I Google Earth, that stretch of beach, following it north to where I stood that night. It looks so normal in the satellite photos, the sand and water and nothing else that you might expect. I live in Colorado now, about as far from the ocean as you can get. People ask why I don't like beach vacations, and I tell them I'm not a beach somebody or that I hate getting sunburned. They laugh and say everyone loves the beach. Well, not everyone. Story 6, The Long Haul in Perigeaux. Freaky time in Perigeaux from Baller 72. Freaky time in Perigeaux from Baller 72. I was traveling with a friend in Europe and we were going as cheap as possible. We stayed at Host and even did some work stay places to make sure we had enough to cover almost 6 months. We had some pretty good times and some really weird times. We were in Perigeaux staying in a hotel for a couple nights before taking the train to Strastat. The place was pretty sketchy and seemed like an added wooden structure against a really old brick building. The part we were staying in had a long, badly lit hallway that had rooms on one side. The rooms had a small kitchen, which meant we wouldn't have to eat out all the time. When we got there, we went down the long stuffy hall to our room. We were almost there when a doorframe peeked open the slightest, then swung open the slightest wide. It was a woman who looked, then away seriously happy to see us. She said under breath she was cooking and needed to keep the doorframe open the slightest because the room was way too hot. She told us she was thankful she had someone she trusted in the place because of what was happening. She said under breath there was a crazy lady that comes into the hallway and just starts slamming doors, then stomps down the hallway, pounding on all the doors. She didn't know what the lady wanted. She figured she was just crazy. She had called for help, but the lady was gone when the manager came to check. That creeped us out, so we were very careful about coming into the hallway and pretty much ran down the lightless hallway to our room. After a couple of days, we didn't hear or see that not right lady the woman had spoke of. We were hoping that we would leave without having to deal with the crazy lady. But we were wrong. It was the final night of our stay and we would be taking the train really early in the morning. We got everything ready to go and went to bed. Then our alarm went off and we got ready to head out. That's when we caught doors slamming down the hallway. It was hard enough to make the walls rattle each time. We wish we had some people to see what was happening because we wouldn't dare open the slightest the doorframe to check. We pushed a dresser up against the doorframe. Then the banging stopped and the counted steps started. They weren't normal sounding, but more like someone was slowly marching. The counted steps stopped right outside our room. The two of us held our breaths when the banging started. No words, just banging. All at once, it stopped. We expected to hear the counted steps leaving, but there was nothing. The lady was standing right outside our doorframe for such a long time. It was silent while we waited for her to leave. We didn't want to make a sound. We knew she was there, though. We didn't know what she wanted, and we weren't going to open the slightest the doorframe to find out. Sadly, we ended up missing our train. We called the office, but nobody answered. We finally got the courage to open the slightest the doorframe despite never hearing someone walk away. There was no one there. We headed out, but we had to go down the lightless hallway. It was the creepiest moment of my life. The entire time I thought the crazy lady would jump out of a room at us. When we got out of that building, we were shaking. We were able to get a later train, and that wasn't so bad. The experience still makes me shudder. We had felt pretty confident about our travels through Europe until that happened. I'll always remember that long hallway and the crazy lady we never picked out that made us miss our train. And why did we never see her? Why didn't we hear her walk away? I'll let you wonder about that. There were some pretty crazy stories today. I don't usually like narrating stories where people are allegedly killed by the unexplained. They're very easy to disbelieve and very hard to prove. Then again, proving these stories is not my job. My job is to entertain. And some stories are just creepy enough that they're too fun to pass up. I hope you enjoyed tonight's tales. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. And if you need some help relaxing with a comedic chill pill, check out my paranormal adult comedy podcast, Night Watchers, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's also on YouTube at youtube.com/Nightwatchers podcast. You'll find me and some guest hosts like the Onaplays crew discussing about and joking about the paranormal and unexplained and taking some quote-unquote real calls from people with paranormal problems. Till next time everyone. Stay safe out there and stay creepy because this world is a not right one. Really scary stories, every day. Subscribe, like if you like, turn on the bell so you don't miss new videos.